The drop pods of the 9th Imperial Expeditionary Force did not land with the clean, precise hiss of advanced stabilization thrusters. They slammed into the obsidian crust of Acheron 9 with a bone-shattering impact that turned internal bulkheads into jagged shrapnel and sent 60 elite cadet recruits sprawling across the sulfur-vented mud. High Commander Vraksh stood upon the command deck of the orbiting cruiser the Sovereign's Pride. His 4 primary optical stalks locked onto the live atmospheric feeds of the planet below. Acheron 9 was officially classified by the Imperial Cartography Board as a Class 8 Deathworld. A hypervolatile nightmare of constant seismic upheaval, acidic lightning tempests, and towering predatory megafauna whose digestive acids could dissolve solid titanium in under 4 planetary rotations. But nobody knew that the planet held a secret far more lethal than its monsters. The objective of the exercise was brutally simple. Survive 30 solar cycles with 0 rations, 0 armor, and 0 external support to earn the crimson-plated insignia of the Imperial Guard. But every single recruit was about to find out that the brutal wilderness was the least of their worries. Down in the choking, ash-choked canyons of Sector 4, 60 bruised and terrified recruits picked themselves up from the wreckage of their pods, coughing violently as the heavy, sulfurous air burned their lungs. Among them were hulking brutes from high-gravity Forge worlds, sleek cybernetically enhanced stalkers from the neon spires, and battle-hardened mercenaries who had survived planetary skirmishes. But none of them noticed the metallic clicking sound echoing from the canyon walls right above their heads. And then there was Lyra, perched on a jagged basalt cliff, watching them like an apex predator sizing up a fresh herd of cattle. She wasn't an Imperial cadet, a mercenary, or a volunteer, but rather a 22-year-old native scavenger whose transport had crashed here years ago and left her stranded. While the Imperial High Command viewed the planet as a lethal prison, Lyra viewed it as a heavily stocked hardware store that she had spent years modifying. She wore a patchwork jacket stitched together from reinforced thermal insulation hides, thick rubber boots scavenged from a crashed scout ship, and a wide leather belt loaded down with heavy industrial wrenches. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the 60 elite recruits scatter into the ash wastes like panicked livestock, completely unaware that their landing coordinates had just triggered a localized perimeter defense grid. Lyra let out a long, weary sigh, shaking her head as she adjusted a heavy canvas tool bag slung over her shoulder, while the ground beneath the recruits began to hum with dangerous electrical current. Every single time the Empire drops another batch of morons into my breeding grounds, she muttered to herself, they stomp right through my copper wiring traps and scare away the migratory scavhogs. She hopped down from the basalt ledge, landing silently in the sulfur mud just a few feet away from Vorgoth, a massive 6'4" elite combat cadet encased in standard-issue training leather who whirled around with a drawn vibro knife. Vorgoth spun around, his multi-lensed goggles widening in surprise as he looked down at the scruffy, grease-stained human girl standing before him with a rusty pipe wrench. Stand aside, native, Vorgoth barked, raising his blade with aggressive posturing while his squad mates fanned out to surround her. I am the designated strike leader of Squad Alpha. This sector has been claimed under Imperial decree. And his voice echoed menacingly off the canyon walls as he demanded her shelter coordinates immediately. Lyra blinked slowly, looking down at Vorgoth's high-tech, razor-sharp vibro knife before letting out an audible groan of sheer professional annoyance. That's a nice blade, Lyra said flatly, her tone entirely devoid of fear, while her fingers tapped against her heavy tool belt. Too bad the power cell is wired backward, because if you press that activation stud right now, the feedback loop is gonna blow your thumb clean off your hand. Vorgoth sneered, tightening his grip on the hilt as his pride took a violent hit in front of his subordinates. Lies. Imperial engineering is infallible, and he jammed his thumb down on the stud with blind, arrogant fury. A blinding white electrical arc leaped from the knife handle, scorching Vorgoth's glove and sending the weapon flying out of his hand with a sharp, humiliating sizzle that filled the air with the smell of burnt ozone. The elite cadet dropped to his knees, clutching his smoking, blackened hand and gasping in shock while the rest of his squad froze in absolute terror. Lyra sighed again, stepping past him as if he were nothing more than a particularly annoying puddle of mud blocking her pathway. Idiot, she muttered, kneeling beside a smoking steam vent and pulling a length of copper tubing from her tool bag. If you guys want to survive more than 10 minutes on my planet, you're gonna have to stop screaming like infants every time the wind blows. Now, pick up that wrench and help me haul this thermal generator core before the acid rain starts. Or you're all gonna freeze to death by midnight. Vorgoth stared up at the grease-stained girl, his imperial pride utterly shattered, realizing with a cold, terrifying clarity that the Class 8 Deathworld wasn't going to kill them. The girl who had tamed it was about to put them to work. But before Vorgoth could even process his humiliation, a deafening mechanical roar shook the canyon floor beneath their boots. The ground split open 10 yards to their left, revealing not a natural earthquake, but a massive, steam-powered subterranean excavator bearing the faded, rusted logo of an ancient corporate mining conglomerate. Lyra cursed under her breath, dropping her copper tubing as the massive steel jaws of the machine whirred to life with ear-splitting friction. "Get back!" Lyra screamed, her professional composure cracking for the first time as she yanked Vorgoth backward by his armor collar just as a volley of high-pressure steam erupted from a severed geotherm line. The 60 recruits scrambled in total disarray, diving behind boulders as the subterranean drill carved a jagged trench through the sulfur mud, unearthing a labyrinth of buried industrial cables that crisscrossed the entire valley. High Commander Vraksh leaned forward in his orbital command chair, his multi-lensed optical arrays flashing in sudden, unmitigated confusion as his tactical monitors registered massive power spikes originating from the dead zone below. "What is that energy signature?" Vraksh barked at his chief communications officer, slamming his primary talon onto the armrest. "That sector has no infrastructure. It's an unmapped wasteland." Down in the canyon, Lyra didn't wait for answers. She sprinted toward the exposed control junction of the subterranean machine, her heavy work boots splashing through the acidic sludge with practiced agility. Vorgoth, still nursing his smoking hand, watched in spellbound disbelief as the diminutive human girl scaled the vibrating metal chassis of the rogue machine like a seasoned structural engineer. "Hey, grease monkey!" Vorgoth shouted over the roar of the engine. "What the hell is this thing?" "It's an automated terraforming dredge left behind by the first corporate syndicate 300 years ago before the atmosphere collapsed," Lyra yelled back without looking down, her hands flying across a rusted manual override panel. "And your little drop pods just clipped its primary seismic relay, waking the damn thing up from its centuries-long sleep." The machine's primary cutting head spun faster, whining with a high-pitched frequency that set the recruits' teeth on edge and drew the attention of the planet's apex predators from the high peaks. A chorus of bone-chilling screeches echoed from the surrounding ridges as 3 massive, multi-limbed alpha-stalkers, creatures with armored chitin and razor-sharp scythe-like appendages, began bounding down the canyon walls toward the vulnerable recruits. "Squad Alpha, form a perimeter," Vorgoth bellowed, instinct finally overriding his shock as he scrambled to his feet and snatched up a heavy iron pipe left behind in the mud. But before the charging beasts could cover half the distance, Lyra slammed her palm down onto a master circuit breaker on the dredge's control panel. A massive shockwave of compressed pneumatic energy erupted from a hidden ring of ground-level towers, instantly driving an invisible sonic barrier across the entire valley floor. The 3 alpha-stalkers hit the invisible wall mid-leap, their momentum shattering against the resonant frequency, in a shower of blue sparks and stunned groans before they tumbled backward into the dirt. The canyon fell into an eerie, vibrating silence, broken only by the heavy panting of 60 terrified recruits and the steady hum of Lyra's improvised perimeter shield. Lyra climbed down from the machine, wiping a streak of black grease across her forehead and glaring daggers at the slack-jawed elite soldiers. "You're lucky my seismic shield held," she snapped, her voice dripping with absolute contempt. "If you idiots break one more cable on my grid, I'm turning the perimeter off and letting the local fauna use you as chew toys." Vorgoth swallowed hard, looking from the unconscious predators to the scruffy human girl who had casually subdued them with industrial salvage. What are you building out here?" Vorgoth asked, his voice losing its imperial arrogance entirely. Lyra turned around, her expression hardening into a look of grim determination as she pointed toward the horizon where a sprawling, fortified compound of towers, cables, and wind turbines gleamed under the violet dual suns. "I'm building a way off this rock," Lyra said quietly. "And if you want to survive long enough to see another star system, you're going to pick up those tools and help me finish it." The recruits exchanged nervous glances, realizing that the survival test imposed by the Empire was no longer about outlasting the wilderness, but about passing the brutal apprenticeship of the Deathworld girl. High Commander Vraksh stared at his blank tactical screens on the orbiting cruiser, his optical stalks twitching with mounting rage as he realized his elite recruits had just been co-opted into a localized engineering workforce. "Deploy the heavy tactical suppression units," Vraksh snarled to his deck officers, his voice trembling with humiliated fury. "Burn that entire valley to ash. Nobody defies the Imperial Guard." But as the orbital drop bay doors hissed open to release the automated extermination drones, a deafening screech of radio static flooded the cruiser's command bridge, cutting off all telemetry from the surface. On the planet below, Lyra stood atop the subterranean dredge, her eyes locked onto a newly wired long-range communication array pulsing with unauthorized, encrypted subspace frequencies. She tapped a final copper wire into place, causing a massive surge of power to race up the spire and punch directly through the planet's dense upper ionosphere right toward the orbiting Imperial warship. Down in the trench, Vorgoth stepped up beside her, holding a heavy wrench in his uninjured hand with a newfound, gritty resolve. "They're coming back, aren't they?" Vorgoth asked, watching the sky darken as orbital reentry flames began to streak across the stratosphere. "Let 'em come," Lyra muttered, a cold, confident smirk touching the corner of her soot-stained lips. "We've got a lot of scrap metal to unload, and I just finished calibrating the welcome mat." The first orbital suppression drone broke through the cloud cover, screaming downward with plasma cannons glowing at full charge, ready to obliterate the valley in a fiery display of Imperial supremacy. But before the drone could acquire its target, a massive, jury-rigged mass-driver cannon hidden beneath a camouflage tarp on the ridge erupted with the force of a localized volcanic eruption. A 2-ton slug of solid tungsten, wrapped in copper coils and supercharged by the ancient terraforming dredge, tore through the atmosphere at Mach 12 and impacted the leading drone dead center, vaporizing it into a cloud of glowing plasma dust before it could even fire a single shot. High Commander Vraksh staggered backward on the bridge as his main screen flickered, flashed a harsh warning code, and then went permanently dark. Down in the canyon, Lyra didn't even bother looking up at the burning wreckage raining down through the stratosphere. She simply tossed her wrench into her canvas bag and turned back toward her workshop. "Break's over," she called out over her shoulder to the 60 bewildered, awestruck elite recruits. "Grab the welding torches, the next wave is going to need a lot more reinforcement." Vorgoth grinned, hefting his heavy iron tool with a firm grip, and marched resolutely behind her into the humming, lethal heart of the Deathworld fortress.